I'd like to welcome you back to your program, Food for Thought. So today I want to challenge all of us with another completely different topic. Our world tells us to be confident, to be who we are. But does humbleness carry any weight in this current age? Well, I'll try to make a case for you that humbleness and humility can take us a long ways. I'll see you in a bit. Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you back to your program, Food for Thought. So as we said, our world is definitely a world of confident people who like to show themselves. Self-esteem is very important. But yet you don't really feel anyone or don't hear anyone talking about humbleness and humility anymore as a characteristic that we need to go through. But yet I think about ourselves. What is it to us to be humble and to have some humility? And I wonder sometimes for myself even, when I look at who I am and how I'm growing in the church, and sometimes I feel I get to a stunted growth. I'm not growing as much as I want to be. I want to be better than that. And I look at all the saints and the lovely people we have in our church and how they have grown to that. And I find that one thing that really differentiates them than us is their humility. So based on this, for me, it was really a struggle. Humility and humbleness could give me some better growth if I just understand it. So it comes to the first question. Why is it hard for us to be humble? Why is humility tough in our nature? Well, there could be some possible answers. Number one, that we in this current society, we're oversaturated with messages of confidence, better self-esteem, and for us, humbleness is really hard to achieve. There's another thing. It definitely, for us, it's really hard to understand how could you genuinely be humble and what difference would it make? It's one of those that is really hard to balance because crossing over humbleness to low self-esteem could be very damaging. There's no question that also it is ingrained in our minds. You all do remember that pride was the first sin. So humbleness is completely antithetical to pride. So for us, if this is really tough for us to do, how did our fathers really talk about humbleness? And for them, anyone who goes and looks over the Desert Fathers, you'll understand how this was really important for them. So one of the beautiful analogies that they always give in the Desert Fathers, just like the sun comes on both wax and clay, that same sun would make the wax melt, but would make the clay harder. So for us, where do we fall? Are we wax or are we clay? When we see the glory of God, do we get harder and more proud, or we melt and we become more humble? There's another beautiful analogy. When we are asked as Christians to overflow, become the salt and the light, when you ask yourself, well, if you have a cup, how can this cup overflow? Well, it has to be full all the way up till its top, and then it would overflow. But none of us can be full until the top, because we'll never be perfect, at least in this life. So how can we achieve that? Well, the only way for a cup that, let's say, it's half full to overflow is that it has to be tilted. That tilting would allow it to overflow. Otherwise, it's impossible. Same thing for us. Since we're only half full or quarter full, the only way for us to become the salt and the light of the world is to become humble. Our cup has to be tilted so that we can really offer anything to the world. So these are just some simple thoughts. But after we come back with the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about what our Desert Fathers said about humbleness. So we did talk about humbleness in the Desert Fathers saying, and now we want to dissect it a little bit more. There's no question when you read the Desert Fathers, you'll find that humbleness and humility had two components. One of them was the human component, and the other one was the divine component. So now let's start talking about the human component. The human component had two factors, an internal factor and an external factor. The internal factor was that you should not give yourself any credit more than it's worth. You should try to kind of humble yourself, and not necessarily in a way that you would kill your self-esteem, but don't give yourself any more credit than it should. Leo Tolstoy has a great saying, and I love that one. A man is like a fraction, whose numerator is what he is, and whose denominator is what he thinks of himself. The larger the denominator, the smaller the fraction. That is just a beautiful saying. So the top number is who you actually are. The bottom number is who you think you are. And the bigger that you think who you are, the smaller the fraction would be. That's the reality of who we are. There's no question that you get a story like on Abba John the Little. And when it was said that Abba John the Little cannot sin, because he's just like as the ground, he cannot fall, because he felt himself that he was so humble. If you're seated on the ground, how can you fall? But if you're seated on a large stool, on a long stool, on a tall stool, you can fall at that point. So that's the first part, the internal part. Do not give yourself any more credit than you deserve. And now comes this external part. Do not judge people. Because the more you judge people, the more you think of yourself, the less humble you would be. And you find that the story, just beautiful stories of our desert fathers on this. It was said on one of the desert fathers when one of the monks asked him, "Father, when I go inside the church and I find my brother sleeping in the church, what should I do?" And that desert father told him, "I would go and sit and put his head on my lap so he would sleep comfortably." That's what was his opinion. It was not to judge that brother for sleeping, but to make him feel comfortable. There's another beautiful story said about Father Abba Amonas. When all the brothers came to him one day and said, "There is a brother who's sinning with a prostitute, and we know what, we just saw her going into his cell. Let's go and catch him right now." So we'll catch him and condemn him and judge him. So Father Amonas went over there, and he knew that the prostitute was in the brother's cell. And he knew that she was hiding underneath the bed when they all went in. So what did he do? He went and sat on the bed and said to all the brothers, "Okay, look around. Can you find her?" So they all started looking around everywhere, trying to find this prostitute. But everyone could not ask Father Amonas to get up from the bed, because out of respect to him. So he covered for that brother. So at the end, when all the brothers couldn't find her, he said, "Well, yeah, I told you that she is not there. So let's just go back to all of our cells, and let's all of us ask for the forgiveness." What did the message that Father Amonas sent to that brother who was sinning? That I covered your sins. That brother felt so bad that night, and he repented from his sin. It's totally different than if you're judging people like that. Another story. When all the brothers came and asked Abba Moses, the black, to come and join them, so to go and judge and condemn another brother, what did he do? He carried a sack full of sand, and he left a hole in the end of that sack. And by the time that he went to the brother, that sack was empty. And all the brothers were asking him, "Abba Moses, what are you doing?" And he answered them back and said, "Well, I had all my sins back on me. But you know what? I don't notice that they're dropping behind me. I'm not noticing them. And yet I come to another brother to judge him. Who am I to judge him? I don't even notice my sins anymore because they're falling behind me and I lost even track of them." That is the true spirit of the fathers who wanted to stop themselves. They didn't think of themselves too much. They were on the ground. They didn't judge others. So at the end, what happens? It happens that the divine grace comes on them, and they feel this really beautiful cycle. The more the divine grace gives them, the more humble they become. You know why? Because they don't feel they are worthy to get all this grace. Let me end by one story. When Abba Macarius one time a devil appeared to him and said, "Why are you better than us? If you fast, we don't eat. If you pray all night, we never sleep. The one thing that makes you better than us is that you are humble and we are proud." That is the one thing that breaks the devil. So if I am feeling stunted growth and I'm unable to grow with all the resources I have in my church, maybe I should give a thought to humbleness and humility. So with this, I hope I've given you something to think about. It's very hard for us in our society to be humble. It's very hard for us to go back to the desert fathers and their own thoughts. But maybe if we want to make a difference in our life and make use of our resources, maybe humbleness and humility is the answer. That's a food for thought. Give it a thought. It may change your life. And have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time.